So unless you've been living under a rock your whole life, then chances are you've heard of the Duke Nukem series. What started out as a couple of simple platformers later turned into one of the best FPS games of the 1990s, with Duke Nukem 3D, which took gameplay to new heights of interactivity with the impressive build engine and its over-the-top violence and humour. Not to mention it was the first time I ever saw boobs in a video game. Anyway, what soon followed was one of the most notorious development cycles of all time with the infamous Duke Nukem Forever, which started out as something amazing looking but turned into something else entirely. Despite what most folks say, I don't think it was a horrible game, but it sure wasn't the sequel we were looking forward to. Since that time, Duke's license has been up in the air more than a fedora at a vaping convention, and it's only recently that the rights have gone to Gearbox Software, who've brought it back to life with the release of Duke Nukem 3D, the 20th Anniversary World Tour Edition. Geez, say that 5 times fast. So in case you're one of the unlucky few who missed out on the Megaton edition, this is another chance to get into the game from the ground up and see what all the fuss is about. Basically what this edition sets out to do is to keep the original Atomic Edition version of the game intact, allowing the game to be run with a mouse and keyboard setup at high resolutions and with improved lighting and controls. Something that admittedly people have been doing for years now with the eDuke source port, but the so-called true 3D rendering in the World Tour Edition I think easily makes this the best looking version of the game so far. Visual options are a little bit bare bones, which is a touch disappointing, but there really wouldn't be all that much stuff you'd need to play around with anyway, and I would think the game would run on a toaster, so hopefully it's not going to be that much of an issue. There's a new multiplayer mode offering up deathmatch or co-op, and they've also redone a lot of the original lines of dialogue, which is a bit jarring if you're more familiar with how it used to be. I also noticed they've replaced the cross icons on medkits with pills for some inane reason, but neither of these are hardly game-breaking or worth complaining about. One of the first things I noticed when going into the game was that the controls seem a little bit floaty, like you're kind of floating around instead of running, if that makes sense. Also, I did notice that the auto-aim system seems to be a bit off at times, but all in all the game plays and feels pretty good. The jittery mouse issues I had with the Megaton edition are now non-existent, and the game feels a lot smoother when aiming, which is a huge plus. So being what is essentially a source port for the Atomic Edition, you've got all the original 4 episodes: Hollywood Holocaust, Lunar Apocalypse, Shrapnel City, and The Birth. Without going into too much detail about the original game, I'll just say your character is the ass-kicking Duke Nukem, saving the world from a hostile alien race that's kidnapped all our womenfolk and mutated the local law enforcement into pigs. As Duke Nukem, you'll use all manner of guns from a pistol, shotgun, RPG, and the iconic shrink ray and freeze ray. Across the game's original episodes as you search for keycards to complete the levels and kill everything that gets in your way. Exploration was always met with rewards, and the way you can interact with the game world is still impressive to this day. But as I said, I'm not going to spend 5 minutes talking about the original game. If you want to know more about it in any great detail, go check out my original video review from a couple of years back. What I guess most people are wondering about is the new 5th episode, Alien World Order, designed by original Duke 3D level designers Alan Bloom and Richard Gray. This episode is an entirely new set of levels, with some set in Amsterdam, the USSR, London, and eventually finishing up with a boss battle in Los Angeles underneath the Hollywood sign. Now this is really just Duke Nukem at its absolute finest, and it's honestly worth buying the 20th Anniversary Edition just for this alone. There's large expansive maps with lots of little nooks and crannies, there's destructible environments and plenty of secrets to find, not to mention the new textures for all of the various maps. Looks fantastic, and the new soundtrack is great to listen to as well. A word of warning though, this new episode is hard, like fuck off hard. If you're playing the game on the come get some difficulty, which you ideally should be, you can expect to get your ass kicked repeatedly. I always thought episode 4, The Birth, was the hardest mission in the original game, but this makes that look like a goddamn cakewalk. There's more than a few maps where they've put in multiple boss type enemies. I mean, there was one instance where I was up against a Battle Lord, an Overlord, and a Cycloid Emperor all at the same time. In fact, you'll be seeing lots and lots of these boss type enemies frequently, and it can be really problematic at times. Now, in the level designer's defense, they have given them less health points, and there's usually plenty of RPG and Devastator ammo lying around, but keep in mind that their rockets are still going to kill you in a single hit. And you're quite often also dealing with a dozen if not more standard enemies as well. As a result, it's a challenging episode, but it can be challenging for the wrong reasons at certain times. This version of the game uses the rewind system when you die too, which I'm not all that fond of. I mean, just let me quick load and get right back into it. It's a small fault on what is otherwise a sensational new episode. There's a new weapon in the form of the Incinerator, which is a reskinned freeze ray that shoots out little balls of fire that burns enemies over time. Though I found this is only really useful against the assault troopers, the pig cops, and the enforcers. This gun is also wielded by a new enemy type that's like a more advanced assault trooper that's able to shrink itself down at will to make hitting it more difficult. All in all though, it's a great new episode and it's a hell of a lot of fun. So really the only thing I find a bit of a letdown here with the World Tour Edition is that it doesn't include all of the expansion packs. Now this was really a huge selling point for the Megaton Edition, as before that the only way to legally get your hands on them was to buy them online somewhere, which wasn't exactly the easiest thing to do considering the rarity of some of them. As such, at the moment, this isn't really any kind of definitive edition of Duke Nukem 3D until they actually do include them at some point. Maybe they're trying to acquire the rights to them, or maybe Gearbox is planning to release them later as DLC, but either way, it's probably the single biggest blow to the game. Another issue is the price. Now they're charging $20 for it, which isn't all that high if you've never played the game before, but if you're at all familiar with the series, then chances are you've finished it before. Either on the Megaton Edition or with the eDuke source port, in which case you're basically paying $20 for one new episode, which I managed to finish in a couple of hours. If you think it's worth spending $20 for a couple hours of new gameplay, then that's your prerogative. Regardless of how you feel about this edition as a package, it retains everything that makes Duke Nukem 3D as awesome as it's always been. And if nothing more, I hope this brings the greatness of the original to a new generation of gamers. Hail to the goddamn king.
Why so serious, Sam?